My wife mocked me to her friends, saying, "He's awful in bed." But it backfired when her best friend laughed and said, "Actually, he's amazing." I could feel the heat of the room growing, despite the air conditioner humming quietly in the background. The sound of laughter echoed through our dining room, a room that, on any other night, would have been filled with the casual clink of silverware and easy conversation. Tonight, though, everything felt sharp, tense. I was still holding my glass of soda, the fizz almost gone, but I didn't care. Cara's laughter was loud, the kind she thought made her charming, but instead just grated on everyone's nerves. She gestured at me dramatically, her glass sloshing dangerously. "Let me tell you about our love life," she said, her voice dripping with that practiced humor she loved to wield. "Reed's idea of foreplay is asking if I'm ready yet." The table burst into laughter. But it wasn't the kind of laughter that made me feel included. No. It felt like a public mockery, and I could only sit there, a stone in the middle of it all. It wasn't that I didn't know what was coming. I had seen it before, the way she'd start on one of her drunken rants, pulling everyone into her game of making fun of me. It was all so familiar. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the way her voice rang out with an exaggerated pitch, or the way her friends leaned in a little too eagerly to hear the next cruel punchline. Same routine. She continued, her tone louder now, getting more of the attention she craved. Same everything. I could set a timer. 2 minutes of kissing if I'm lucky. Then straight to business for exactly, and I mean exactly, 4.5 minutes. The room erupted again. I stayed still. The awkward silence that followed felt heavier than any of her jokes ever had. My hands clenched around my glass, but I kept my gaze fixed on the table. I wasn't going to argue with her, not here, not now. Let her have her fun, I thought. But then, just as she leaned in closer, her voice taking on that private, conspiratorial tone like she was sharing a secret, her best friend Sloane, sitting across from us, put down her drink. "That's funny," Sloane said, sounding completely casual, "because Reed's actually incredible in bed." Everything froze. Cara's face went from tipsy amusement to something sharper, something colder. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for a reaction, but I didn't give her one. Monica, her friend, was still laughing, but it was nervous now, like she had no idea how to respond. The other couples looked between each other, unsure of whether to laugh along or pretend it hadn't happened. I could feel the shift in the air. It was like the whole dinner had been leading up to this moment, this fragile instant where everything cracked. Cara turned to Sloane, her face turning a shade of red I hadn't seen in years. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice laced with ice. Sloane shrugged, took another sip of her drink, and replied with a calm that made the room feel even smaller. "Just saying. From personal experience, he's definitely not following any IKEA instructions." My heart thudded in my chest, and I tried to focus on the glass in my hand, anything to avoid looking at Cara's face as it morphed from confusion to fury. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. No one moved. No one said anything. And in that frozen moment, I realized how much I had been holding back all these years, how much I had let slide, convinced that it was easier to just stay quiet and play the role. But this was different. Cara opened her mouth, her words barely a whisper, barely a threat. "You're joking." Sloane's smile stayed small, but there was no mistaking the victory in it. Nope. It wasn't just the confrontation that hit me. It was the realization of what had been building in the silence all these years. Every joke, every little comment that had chipped away at me had finally culminated in something too big to ignore. And in that moment, the tables had turned. Not just because of what Sloane had said, but because I knew something was coming. Something I couldn't hide anymore. The game had changed. I stayed silent, my mind racing as the room swirled around me. The awkwardness was suffocating, but there was no way out. The sounds of laughter and muffled voices seemed distant, like I was underwater, hearing it all but unable to respond. I glanced at Cara, her face flushed a deep red. For the first time that night I could see her mask slipping. It wasn't just the mocking. It was something more. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. The table was still frozen in place, unsure whether to join the awkward laughter or step in to protect Cara. No one knew what to do, not even her closest friends. But I remained quiet, sipping my soda slowly, trying to drown out the rising tide of humiliation. Sloane didn't seem bothered at all. She sat across from us, cool as ever, her smile barely hidden behind her drink. She didn't apologize for what she said, nor did she seem like she regretted it. It was almost like she knew this was coming, like she had been waiting for this moment, watching Cara crumble. Cara's eyes shot daggers at her, but Sloane didn't flinch. She simply shrugged, setting her drink down on the table and wiping her lips with a napkin, as if we weren't all standing on the edge of a cliff. I couldn't look away from Cara. I had seen this side of her before, the one that hid behind laughter and arrogance to cover up insecurity. But tonight, the cracks were more than visible. She had made herself the center of attention, pushing me to the edge, and now she was being exposed for the fraud she was. "How long has this been going on?" Cara asked, her voice low and controlled, but I could hear the sharpness beneath the calm tone. Sloane took her time answering, almost savoring the moment. 6 months, she said, casually lifting her glass to her lips. "Maybe more. But I can say this, Reed's been a hell of a lot more of a man than you've given him credit for." The silence that followed felt thick. The tension was unbearable, and I could feel every pair of eyes at the table flicking between us, trying to make sense of what was happening. I should have been angry, maybe even upset, but instead I just felt numb. For years I had allowed myself to be the butt of her jokes, the invisible man in our marriage. Every time she made fun of me or belittled me in front of others, I let it slide, thinking it was just a phase. I told myself that this was just how she was, that it wasn't worth fighting over. But hearing Sloane speak up, hearing the truth spill out in front of everyone, forced me to face something I had been avoiding for far too long. "I think it's time for a reality check, Cara," Sloane continued, her voice steady. "You're not fooling anyone here. Everyone at this table knows you've been playing Reed for a fool. And honestly, it's time someone called you out." Cara's face was unreadable now, like a mask had fallen over her eyes, blocking all the emotion she had been trying so hard to suppress. She glanced at me then, her gaze flickering from Sloane to me, like she was trying to gauge how far this had gone. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. I just kept my eyes on my glass. I wasn't going to say anything. Not yet. This wasn't about defending myself, not anymore. It was about seeing her for who she truly was. The woman who had reduced me to a joke. The woman who had never seen me as anything more than an accessory in her perfect life. Sloane, however, wasn't done. "You've been living a lie, Cara. And it's not just Reed who's been the victim here. It's all of us. Everyone at this table knows exactly what's been going on." "Shut up," Cara snapped, her voice trembling slightly. But it was too late. The damage was already done. The dinner that had started with so much promise had turned into a spectacle, a moment of pure chaos. Cara, the woman who had always been the center of attention, was now reduced to a trembling, furious shell of herself, while I sat quietly, the truth finally breaking free. I couldn't look at her anymore, not with pity, not with anger. Just with a cold sense of realization. The life I had been living, the one where I hid behind her smile and let myself be dismissed, was over. And I wasn't going to let her take me down with her anymore. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Cara tried to salvage what was left, but it was no use. Her friends, the people who had once laughed at my expense, now seemed unsure of where to place their loyalty. They looked at me, then at her, but no one spoke up. The quiet that settled in the room was deafening. And I knew then that everything had shifted. When the guests finally started to leave, I stayed behind, feeling the weight of the evening settle over me. The clink of the door closing behind the last of them felt like the final nail in the coffin. But even then, even after all the humiliation, all the secrets that had been exposed, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. The words that should have been said were stuck in my throat. But I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The evening had ended, but the weight of it all settled on my shoulders like a stone I couldn't shake. Cara's outburst, Sloane's revelation, it had all happened so fast. And yet everything felt like it was shifting in slow motion. The laughter from the dinner still echoed in my ears, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that filled me with warmth. It was hollow, full of judgment, and I realized then just how much I had let myself be defined by other people's perceptions. As the last of the guests trickled out, I stayed behind, watching them leave through the open door, still unsure of how to react. My hands trembled slightly. I'm pregnant, though I was careful not to show it. I didn't want anyone to see the cracks in the facade I had spent years maintaining. The world outside felt disconnected, as if I were trapped in some twisted version of reality, where everyone around me had the answers except for me. Cara had left the room earlier, but I could still hear her voice ringing in my mind. She was furious. I could feel the tension in the air, even after the last of the laughter had died down. She was angry, but I could hear the uncertainty behind it now, the deep cracks forming in her once solid foundation. She wasn't the confident, untouchable woman she had been just hours ago. I stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring down at the cold glass of soda in my hand. The bubbles had long since gone flat, but I didn't care. I wasn't thirsty. I needed to process. Needed to make sense of what had happened. I replayed the evening in my mind over and over. The way Cara had turned the evening into a spectacle, mocking me in front of everyone. And yet, there was something so painful about the way she'd done it, like she had done it so many times before that she didn't even think twice about how it might affect me. She had built this life where I was nothing more than a backdrop, a silent partner, meant to support her and never challenge her. But tonight, the walls had come crashing down, and I was finally forced to face the truth. Sloane had thrown me a lifeline, but it hadn't been out of kindness.
It wasn't some act of friendship.
No, it had been something more, something I hadn't seen coming. She had always been there, lurking in the background, watching, waiting. And when the moment came, when Cara revealed her true nature, Sloane didn't hesitate. She stepped in, but even then, even after all that, I couldn't bring myself to feel gratitude. Sloane had exposed Cara for who she really was, but I could feel something else bubbling beneath the surface. A sense of unease. A strange feeling in my gut that told me I wasn't out of the woods yet. I needed to think, to plan. But first I needed to talk to her. Cara. I had to know if she understood the damage she had caused. The next morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, alone. The house was eerily quiet. I could still smell the remnants of the evening, the faint scent of wine, and the lingering fragrance of her perfume. It was a reminder of everything I had tolerated, everything I had allowed to happen without standing up for myself. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sloane. "Call me when you get this," it read. I hesitated before responding. What did she want now? I stared at the message for a few moments longer, then pushed the phone aside. I wasn't ready to deal with her yet. I needed to focus on Cara, on what had happened last night. I picked up the phone and dialed her number, the sound of the ringing tone filling the quiet space around me. When Cara answered, her voice was shaky. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone cold but distant. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk." There was a long pause before she responded, the silence pressing down on me. "About what?" she asked, her voice softening just a little. "About last night," I said, trying to keep my tone calm, controlled. "And about everything else." There was another pause before she spoke again, her voice wavering. I don't know if I can do this, Reed. I don't know how we fix this. I could feel the crack in her facade. The woman who had always been so sure of herself, so confident in her control, was now the one who was unsure. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that had been missing for years. Relief. The conversation stretched on, each word laced with tension. Cara explained herself, or at least, she tried to. But nothing she said could change the fact that the damage had been done. I had seen the truth. I had seen who she really was, and I couldn't unsee it. The evening had shattered everything. My marriage, my self-worth, everything I had been holding onto for so long. But as I listened to her struggle to apologize, to explain, I realized something. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about what she had done, or how she tried to make it right. It was about me. For the first time in years, I was ready to take control of my life, to stop being the invisible man in my own story, to stop hiding behind her. I didn't have all the answers yet. But I knew this much: I couldn't go back to being that man. The man who let it all slide, who let himself be the joke, who let someone else dictate his worth. The conversation ended with no clear resolution, but I wasn't angry. I was calm, determined. And in that calm, I knew what I had to do next. I sat there in the quiet aftermath of the phone call, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Cara's voice had been soft, almost pleading at the end. But I could hear the cracks in it. It was clear she didn't know how to fix this, and I wasn't sure I could help her. She had hurt me in ways I hadn't even fully realized until that moment. But the hardest part wasn't her actions. It was how I had allowed it to happen for so long. I could still hear her words echoing in my head. I don't know how we fix this. And I realized then that I wasn't sure if I wanted to fix it. The house felt empty without the buzz of the dinner, without the sound of people laughing and talking over each other. It was just me now, sitting in this quiet room, trying to process everything. It wasn't just the affair or the humiliation. It was the realization that I had been living a life that wasn't mine. A life where I played the role of the dutiful husband, the one who did everything right and never questioned anything. But what did that get me? A marriage that was built on lies. A life that was meant to be shared but was instead divided. I looked around the room, trying to find something to ground me, something that felt real. The kitchen was still messy from the night before, the remnants of food and drink scattered around. I picked up a plate, absent-mindedly wiping it clean, but even the act of cleaning seemed futile. The mess in the house was nothing compared to the mess I was feeling inside. I had to face the truth. Cara had been having an affair with Jared for months, and I had been too blind to see it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to see it. There had always been something off between us, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I had excused her behavior, brushed off her disinterest, told myself that the cracks were just part of any long-term relationship. But deep down I knew. I had known for a while, and yet I had stayed. Stayed because I thought I wasn't worthy of more. Stayed because I didn't think I had the strength to walk away. But now everything was different. I had a choice. And for the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. It wasn't about getting back at Cara, not really. It was about me. About reclaiming what had been taken from me, my dignity, my sense of self, and my future. I had spent so long playing the role of the nice guy, the guy who did everything for everyone else, that I had forgotten who I was. I had become a placeholder in my own life. But no more. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need her approval. The sound of my phone buzzing snapped me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Sloane. "Are you okay?" I stared at the text for a moment, unsure of what to say. She had helped me last night. But it wasn't for me. It was for herself. She had her own reasons for exposing Cara's betrayal, and I couldn't ignore that. She had done it out of revenge, not out of friendship or care for me. But at the same time, she had given me the truth. And that truth had set something in motion inside me. I responded, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'm fine. Thanks for last night. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle around me. The air felt thick, heavy with all the unspoken words, the things I had ignored for too long. And then, without thinking, I picked up the phone and dialed the lawyer I had spoken to a few days earlier. I needed to know my options. I wasn't going to sit in this house anymore, pretending that everything was fine. The lawyer answered on the second ring. "Hello, Mr. Reed. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm ready to move forward." There was a brief silence before the lawyer responded. "Good. I'll get everything in order. We'll make sure you're protected." That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't just walking away from Cara. I was walking toward something else. Something better. As I ended the call, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't just about the affair, or Cara's betrayal, or the lies. It was about me taking back control of my life. The house still felt empty, but I didn't mind anymore. It was mine now. The future was mine. I'm pregnant. And I was going to make sure I didn't waste another minute living someone else's story. I stood up, walking toward the bedroom, taking one last look around the house. This was the last time I would see it like this. I was ready to move on. Ready to build something new. The days following the phone call with my lawyer felt like a blur, a whirlwind of emotions that I wasn't ready to process. But as much as I wanted to shut myself off from everything, I couldn't ignore what was coming next. I had taken the first step, admitting to myself that I was done living in the shadows of my own life. But the hard part was yet to come. I stood in the living room, pacing slowly, my mind running over everything I had set in motion. The lawyer was preparing the paperwork, gathering the necessary evidence. And I was doing my part. I was removing myself from the life I had built with Cara, step by step. My mind kept returning to the conversation I'd had with her the other night. The way she had pleaded, how her voice had cracked when she realized she was losing me. But as much as I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, maybe even a little regret, I didn't. I felt nothing. And that scared me. The truth was, I hadn't been happy for a long time. I had allowed myself to be treated as less than. I had accepted the crumbs she threw me, pretending it was enough because I didn't think I deserved more. And for what? So that I could keep the peace. It wasn't peace. It was silence, suffocating and unspoken. And I wasn't going to let it silence me anymore. I went into the bedroom and started packing. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house, in this life. Not when everything had changed. The act of packing was strangely liberating. I folded my clothes carefully, the way I always did, but this time it felt different. There was no rush, no urgency. Just a quiet certainty that I was leaving behind everything that had held me down. I thought about Cara, about the way she had looked at me the night before, eyes wild with disbelief. She had no idea what I was capable of, how far I was willing to go to regain control of my life. She had underestimated me. I zipped up the bag and stood for a moment, staring at the empty space. The silence that filled the room now was different from the one that had suffocated me for years. This was the silence of freedom. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a message from Sloane. Everything set for tonight. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of her involvement in everything sinking in. I still didn't know if I could trust her. She had done me a favor, yes, but it was clear that her motives weren't entirely selfless. I opened the message and replied with one word. Yes. I wasn't sure what she expected from me, but I didn't owe her anything more. She had her own reasons for what she did, and that was fine. I didn't need her validation, not anymore. The next few hours felt like the calm before the storm. I moved methodically, packing up the last of my things and preparing for what came next. I knew I was walking away from a marriage, but more than that, I was walking away from a version of myself that I no longer recognized. I took one last look around the room, taking in the furniture, The pictures on the walls, the remnants of a life I had built, with someone who had never truly seen me. This house had once felt like home, but now it felt like a prison. And I wasn't going to be its prisoner anymore. I walked out of the room, down the stairs, and into the living room. The house was eerily quiet again. There was no noise, no sounds of Cara moving about or talking on the phone. It was just me. I couldn't wait to leave. The door clicked shut, behind me with a finality that echoed through the empty house. As I stepped into my car, I felt the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet. But I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. I started the engine and drove away, the city lights flashing by as I moved further from the life I had known. I didn't have a clear picture of the future, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone define me anymore. Not Cara, not Sloane, not anyone. This was my life now, and it was time to start living it. The evening of the dinner felt like a lifetime ago, but its impact lingered, each second stretching into the next as I waited for Cara to return home. I had no idea how things would unfold, but I knew one thing: everything was about to change. The silence in the house was deafening, more oppressive than it had ever been. The walls that once seemed so familiar now felt like barriers, closing me in on a reality I had been avoiding. When she walked through the door, humming softly, I barely recognized her. She moved through the house with a forced cheerfulness, as though nothing had happened, as if the events of the night hadn't shattered the foundation of everything we had. "Hey babe," Cara said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "How was your day?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't bring myself to engage in the same tired pleasantries we'd exchanged for years. Her words felt hollow, empty, like they were coming from a stranger. I simply watched her as she unpacked her bag, the scent of her perfume filling the room. She was acting as though everything was normal, as though she hadn't just humiliated me in front of our closest friends, as though her betrayal had never happened. It was maddening. I stood up from the couch and walked toward her. She looked up, surprised by my sudden movement, but I didn't let that stop me. I pulled her close, holding her by the arms, and looked directly into her eyes. "What's this all about, Cara?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. She smiled, a nervous smile. "What do you mean?" "You're pretending like nothing happened," I said, my voice colder now. "Like you didn't just drag me through the mud in front of our friends. Like you didn't tell them I'm useless, boring, that I'm not enough." Her expression faltered, and for the first time, I saw a hint of guilt flicker across her face. But it was fleeting. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. "I was just joking. You know I love you, right?" I shook my head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You think I'm stupid? You think I can't see what you've been doing?" The realization hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the affair, or the way she had mocked me. It was the way she had treated me for years. Like I was nothing more than an accessory in her life, there to make her look good. And I had allowed it. I had let it happen because I didn't think I deserved more. But I wasn't that man anymore. "I know about Jared," I said flatly. She froze. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, finally, her voice dropped to a near whisper. "What do you mean, you know?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the screenshots I had saved. The messages between her and Jared. The hotel reservations. The lies she had told. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't need to. The evidence was right there, plain and undeniable. Her face drained of color, and her eyes darted to the phone and then back to me. "Read, please." But I didn't let her finish. "Don't please me, Cara. You've made your choice. You've made it clear that I'm nothing to you." I watched her struggle to find the right words, to make it better somehow, but there was no way to fix it. There was nothing she could say that would make this okay. The truth was out, and now everything was different. "You're right," she finally said, her voice shaking. "I don't know what happened. It just happened." She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. No, I said sharply. It didn't just happen. You planned this. You manipulated me into thinking everything was fine, while you had your fun with Jared. You treated me like a joke, Cara. Like I wasn't even worth your respect. She took a step back, her hands trembling as she wiped away the tears that had started to fall. I'm sorry, Reed. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear. I thought I could have everything, you and him. And then, I don't know, I just got lost. Her words were meaningless to me now. I had heard them all before, the apologies, the promises that things would change, but I was done believing them. No, I said again, my voice firm. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too, and now it's over. I'm done with this. I stood there, watching her crumble in front of me, but I felt no satisfaction in it. This wasn't about getting revenge. It was about me finally taking control of my life, of my future. I couldn't stay in this marriage any longer, not when she had taken everything from me, my self-respect, my dignity, my trust. I've already filed for divorce, I told her, my voice steady but cold, her face twisted in confusion. What, you're serious? Yes, I replied. I'm serious. I'm done. This marriage is over. Her world seemed to crumble around her, and she collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands as the reality of what I had said sank in. I could hear her sobbing quietly, but it didn't move me the way I thought it would. I was numb. This was it, the final chapter. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, my mind racing with thoughts of the future. It was over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. As I opened the door, I turned back to her one last time. Pack your things, Cara. I want you out by tomorrow. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, staring at me, broken. But I was already gone, stepping out into the night, with the door closing behind me, the sound of her crying fading as I walked away. The first step had been taken. The hardest one. And now, I was free. The next few days felt like a slow unraveling. A process I couldn't speed up no matter how hard I tried. I had moved out, but it still felt like I was tethered to the life I was leaving behind. The apartment I found wasn't much, but it was mine. And that was all that mattered. I spent the first day getting things in order, setting up what would be my new space, one that was all mine. No memories of Cara, no echoes of the life I had once lived. I had thought that after everything, the pain would hit hard, but it didn't. At least, not yet. Instead, it was a strange kind of quiet. The kind of stillness that comes when you're no longer drowning in the noise of someone else's life. There were no arguments, no sarcastic remarks from Cara, no pretending anymore. But even in that silence, I could feel the weight of the decisions I had made. I couldn't ignore the gravity of it, but somehow, the emptiness was easier to bear than I had imagined. I wasn't just free from Cara. I was free from myself too, the man who had let it all slide, who had accepted the crumbs and convinced himself he was okay with it. The phone buzzed beside me as I unpacked the last of my boxes, and I saw the name flash on the screen: Sloane. I had ignored her calls and texts up until now, but this one was different. I didn't have to think twice before answering. Hey, I said, my voice neutral, careful. Reed, we need to talk. Sloane replied. About what? I kept my tone even, not ready to dive into whatever game she was playing. I just want to make sure you're okay. Her voice softened, though there was something in it I couldn't place. I know last week was a lot. I didn't want to just leave things like that. I sat on the edge of the couch, the weight of her words sinking in. She had helped me expose the truth, and while I couldn't deny that I appreciated it, I knew her motivations weren't pure. It wasn't about me. It was about her own need for closure, her need to win, and maybe, just maybe, to get back at Cara for everything that had happened between them. I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Everything's settled. I'm moving on. There was a long pause on the other end. I just want to make sure you're really okay. You've been through a lot. We've both been through a lot. And you deserve better than what she did to you, Reed. You know that, right? Her words were almost comforting, and for a moment, I felt that familiar tug, the one that made me think there might still be something left between us. But I shut it down quickly. I wasn't going to fall into that trap again. I don't need your help, Sloane, I replied, my voice firm now. I don't need anyone's help. I'm done with all of this. I could hear her sigh on the other end. You think you can just shut it all off? Move on and forget. I'm not forgetting, I said, my words cutting through the tension in the air. But I'm not holding on to any of this either. I've let go. It's over. Sloane was quiet for a moment, and I could tell she was processing what I had said. Part of me thought she would push back, but instead, she simply said, I get it. I just wanted you to know that I'm here if you need anything. You're not alone in this. The sincerity in her voice surprised me, but I wasn't about to let myself be swayed. I wasn't looking for anything from her, least of all a friendship forged in the flames of betrayal. I'm good, Sloane, I said, my voice steady. Thanks for everything, but this is where it ends. Another long pause followed. I didn't wait for her response. Instead, I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the couch beside me. I had spent so many years putting others first, bending to their expectations, their needs, their desires. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was doing what was right for me. I wasn't going to let anyone else define me anymore. The next day, I received a message from one of the guys from the dinner, Jason. Dude, you hear about Cara? I paused, unsure if I wanted to know, but curiosity got the best of me. What about her? I replied. Got fired. Jason texted back. HR got some kind of anonymous tip about her and Jared. They let her go right after. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction in those words. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to feel like everything had been set right. But another part of me just felt empty. This wasn't a victory. It was just the end of a chapter. And I wasn't sure how I felt about the story closing. I put the phone down and went to the window, staring out at the city. The world was still turning, the sky still moving from blue to orange as the sun set, but everything had changed. I had changed. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Sloane. I just sent everything to HR. It's done now. Jared's gone too. I thought you deserved some justice. I stared at the message, my mind racing. She had gone behind my back, making sure that Cara's life came crashing down the same way mine had. But I wasn't sure what to think. Was it justice, or was it just more of the same? I deleted the message without responding. In the end, I didn't need her help. I didn't need anyone's validation or revenge. I had done what I needed to do to move forward. The rest of the evening passed quietly, with me lost in my own thoughts. I had closed the door on my past, but the future was still uncertain. All I knew was that I wasn't going to be the man who stayed hidden in the background anymore. The next day, I heard from Jason again. Dude, you're not gonna believe this. That guy Cara was seeing, his wife found out, posted everything online. It's all over Facebook. I shook my head, the absurdity of it all sinking in. Everyone's lives were falling apart. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to let their chaos drag me down with it. Sloane had done what she had to do, but I was done with her, too. I was done with all of it. I wasn't going to let anyone control my future. This was my life now. And for the first time, I was ready to live it. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and an underlying sense of relief that I couldn't shake. The silence in my apartment had become a comfort. It felt like a cocoon, a place where I could finally breathe without the suffocating pressure of pretending to be something I wasn't. I had gone through the motions, clearing out the last of Cara's things, making sure my new life was set up, but there were still moments where it hit me, the weight of what I had done, the reality of what I had lost. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to feel regret. It wasn't because I was proud of how everything had turned out, I wasn't. But I had done what needed to be done. I had cut ties with the past, with the person I had been, and that felt like something I hadn't done in a long time. On the third day, I woke up to a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively reached for my phone, checking the time. It was still early. Too early for anyone to be here. I opened the door cautiously, only to be met with a scene I hadn't expected. Sloane, standing there with a suitcase in hand. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat, but not unkind. She didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me for a moment, her eyes tired but resolute. "I needed to see you," she finally said, her voice low. I stepped aside to let her in, though I wasn't sure what to expect. She had played a role in everything that had happened, had been the catalyst in exposing the truth. But that didn't mean I owed her anything. Sloane placed her suitcase on the floor and sat down on the couch, her eyes scanning the apartment. "I know I'm not exactly welcome, but I needed to talk to you. To apologize for the way I acted." I raised an eyebrow. Apologize? For what? For getting involved in my life, for causing chaos? Or for trying to play the hero? She flinched at my words, but didn't shy away. "Maybe all of it. I was just trying to help. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I didn't think about what it would do to you, and I know now I was just as bad as Cara in some ways." Her admission hit harder than I expected. Part of me had always known that Sloane's motivations hadn't been entirely pure, but hearing her admit it, seeing the guilt in her eyes, made me realize that maybe I had misjudged her. "I'm not looking for an apology, Sloane," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I'm done with the games. I'm done with the lies. I'm not going to pretend I didn't appreciate what you did, but that doesn't mean I need you in my life." She nodded slowly, her face softening. "I get it. I don't expect anything from you. But I thought I owed you an explanation. After everything that happened, I couldn't just walk away without saying something." I looked at her for a long moment, my mind racing. I had spent so much time trying to move on, trying to put everything behind me, and now here she was, someone who had been part of that chaos, sitting in front of me, asking for closure. But the truth was, I didn't need closure from her. I had already found it within myself. "I don't need you to fix anything, Sloane," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "I'm fixing things on my own. I'm finally doing what's best for me. And that means I can't have anyone in my life who's still living in the past." Sloane's lips pressed into a thin line as she stood up, picking up her suitcase. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't say anything as she walked out the door. I just stood there for a moment, watching her go, the finality of it all sinking in. It wasn't a grand goodbye, it wasn't a dramatic exit. It was just over, and in that moment, I realized I was finally free. The next few days passed in a haze of normalcy. I didn't talk to Cara again, and I didn't need to. She had tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored her calls and messages. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and so had I. I spent my time focusing on myself, on what I wanted from this new chapter in my life. I'm pregnant. I began to find small joys in the things I had ignored for so long, the feeling of waking up without the weight of someone else's expectations. The peace that came with knowing I wasn't trapped anymore. But even with the calm, there was still a part of me that felt lost. I had lived so long for someone else that I wasn't entirely sure what I was supposed to do with all this newfound freedom. One afternoon, I found myself walking down the street, my feet carrying me without thinking. I ended up at a small park, one I hadn't visited in years. I sat on a bench, watching the world go by, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think about the future. What did I want? The answer came slowly, but when it did, it felt right. I wasn't sure what the next few months would bring, but I knew this. I wasn't going to settle for anything less than the life I deserved. I wasn't going to hide anymore. And that was enough. As the sun began to set, I stood up, taking a deep breath. The future was waiting, and I was ready for it.